Hello. Happy Saturday, or whatever day in the future it is for you. Happy day. Hi, Yara. She tells me to say hi to her, so I do in case she signs on. We are on the tale of two cities, this long journey we've been on together. If you've been with me, thank you for staying with me. Thank you for sticking it out. It is such a good story. This last book 3 is really when everything comes together. You had to have book 1 and book 2 to get to book 3, right? Isn't that about the journey in life? You can't get to the main point until you've gone through all the hard stuff, because it's only a victory when you know how hard the loss was. So we had to dig through all these characters and the history and Dr. Manette and everything he went through. Kelly, it's so good to hear you on, or know that you're on with me. I miss you because you were my early subscribers. You've been with me from the beginning, and I appreciate that. So this is chapter 5, The Wood Sawyer. And that's Sawyer. I'm curious to know what a wood sawyer is. Is it a person who saws wood, or a sawyer? Do we not pronounce it? Let's see. I'm Googling. Wood sawyer. There we go. I think it means saw, or referring to someone who saws wood. How do you pronounce it? Let's see. Pronounce. I would have said it's a wood sawer, Sawer, but it's Sawer. Hi, Dinah. How to pronounce? Oh, I'm casting, so I can't pronounce it. That was weird. How to pronounce? Let's see. What do you guys think?
Sawyer.
Sawyer. It is Sawyer. I've never known that before. So this is about someone who's sawing wood, right? 1 year and 3 months. During all that time, that was the sentence, 1 year and 3 months. All that time, Lucy was never sure from hour to hour, but that the guillotine would strike off her husband's head next. Oh, what a terrible way to live. Hello, hello. Talk to you on Telegram and here. So she's wondering every day. She doesn't get to talk to her husband. She's wondering every day, did the guillotine get him? Is he still alive, or is he dead? Every day through the stony streets, the tumbrils now jolted heavily, filled with condemned. Lovely girls, bright women, brown-haired, black-haired, and gray, youths, stalwart men and old, gentle-born and peasant-born, all red wine for La Guillotine. All daily brought into light from the dark cellars of the loathsome prisons and carried to her through the streets to slake her devouring thirst, that personification of the guillotine. Liberty, equality, fraternity, or death, the last much the easiest to bestow, O guillotine. If the suddenness of our calamity and the whirling wheels of the time had stunned the doctor's daughter into awaiting the result in idle despair, it would but have been with her as it was with many. For those of you that are trying to work on your reading fluency, notice how syntax, my understanding of the word order of how it should be, that's what causes me to stumble when I try to read out loud. So that sentence was organized in an atypical fashion. So it says, if the sudden of her calamity and the whirling wheels of time had stunned the doctor's daughter into awaiting the result in idle despair, it would but have been with her as it was with many. So we don't speak that way anymore. And so my brain was trying to, because I read pretty fast, and so my brain wanted it to be in the organization that I'm accustomed to it to, rather than reading what I see there. That's why if you're reading in class and you're working on fluency, and if you could see my hand as I'm at the book, I tend to follow along with the words just to keep my brain tracking. That's a really good habit to get into with reading. Some people will say, oh, like when we're children, we're told to stop tracking. And those teachers that do that, I don't like that. Tracking has been shown to be very helpful. But from the hour when she had taken the white head to her fresh young bosom in the garret of Saint Antoine, she'd been true to her duties. She was truest to them in the season of trial, as all the quiet, loyal, and good will always be, saying good people are always good people. As soon as they were established in their new residence and her father had entered on the routine of his abdications, she arranged the little household as exactly as if her husband had been there. Everything had its appointed place and its appointed time. Little Lucy, she taught as regularly as if they had all been united in their English home. So she's trying to keep the routine going, which is, I found as a teacher, that children, and I think adults, when there's trauma, when there's dilemma, like in this time of the pandemic, having a routine, getting a schedule that you follow regularly. Humans like routine and habit. So that's what she's trying to do. She doesn't know where her husband is, if he's coming home, if he's being guillotined. She just goes on every day with the business as usual. The slight devices with which she cheated herself in the show of a belief that they would soon be reunited, the little preparations for his speedy return, the setting aside of his chair and his books, these and the solemn prayer at night for one dear prisoner especially among the many unhappy souls in prison and the shadow of death, were almost the only outspoken reliefs of her heavy mind. She did not greatly alter in appearance. The plain dark dresses similar to mourning dresses, which she and her child wore, were as neat and as well attended to as the brighter clothes of happy days. She lost her color, so she's looking pale and gaunt from stress. And the old and intent expression was a constant, not an occasional thing. Otherwise, she remained pretty and comely. Sometimes at night, on kissing her father, she would burst into the grief she had repressed all day and would say that her sole reliance under heaven was upon him. He was resolutely answered, "Nothing can happen to him without my knowledge. And I know that I can save him, Lucy." So her father's always encouraging her. They had not made the round of their changed life many weeks when her father said to her on coming home one evening, "My dear, there is an upper window in the prison to which Charles can sometimes gain access at 3 in the afternoon. When he can get to it, which depends on many uncertainties and incidents, he might see you in the street, he thinks, if you stood in a certain place that I can show you. But you will not be able to see him, my poor child. And even if you could, it would be unsafe for you to make a sign of recognition." "Oh, show me the place, my father, and I will go there every day." This is their only connection to each other. And she's like, "Oh, he could see me. And even though I can't see him, I'll know we're looking." You know, if you've ever, I remember when I was overseas and my oldest son was back in the United States, I had gone on a trip without him. I told him, let's look at the moon, because Fievel, he loved that movie, Fievel. And they sing that song, "Somewhere Out There, Beneath the Pale Moonlight." So it's that same idea. We'll both look at the moon and at the same moment, and we'll feel connected. So that's what she's saying. At 3:00 every day, I'll go to this spot, and maybe on some days, my husband will be able to see me and we'll feel connected. Very romantic thought. And remember the time period that Dickens is writing in. So from that time, in all weathers, she waited there 2 hours. As the clock struck 2, she was there, and at 4, she turned resignedly away. When it was not too wet or inclement bad weather for her child to be with her, they went together. At other times, she was alone, but she never missed a single day. So you'll also, I've talked about the theme of honor. You'll also notice the theme that Dickens does of fidelity, of being loyal to that, like, for example, Laurie is loyal to Tellson's Bank. It's not necessarily loyalty of a husband or wife, but this idea of being loyal, of doing your duty, of being someone that's consistent, you can trust. You can see that theme coming across. It was a dark and dirty corner of a small winding street. The hovel of a cutter of wood into links for burning was the only house at that end. All else was wall. On the 3rd day of being there, he noticed her. "Good day, citizeness." "Good day, citizen." "Hello, Sunshine Alley." "I didn't see your greeting." This mode of address was now prescribed by decree. It had been established voluntarily some time ago among the more thorough patriots, but was now law for everybody. "Walking here again, citizeness?" "You see me, citizen." The wood saw her. who was a little man with a redundancy of gesture. He had once been a mender of roads. Now, is this the mender of roads that had come to the burning of the Marquise mansion? It's in parentheses. So is Dickens telling us it's the same guy, or just random information? He was a mender of roads. Cast a glance at the prison, pointed at the prison, and putting his 10 fingers before his face to represent bars, peeped through them joculussly. He's like saying, "Oh, you're there to meet somebody?" "But it's not my business," said he, and went on sawing his wood. Next day he was looking out for her and accosted her the moment she appeared, spoke to her. "What, walking here again, citizeness?" "Yes, citizen." "Ah, a child too. Your mother, is it not, my little citizeness?" "Do I say yes, mamma?" whispered little Lucy, drawing close to her. "Yes, dearest." "Yes, citizen. Ah, but it's not my business. My work is my business. See my saw? I call it my little guillotine. La ha ha ha!" And off his head comes as he cuts the wood. The billet fell as he spoke, and he threw it into a basket. "I call myself the Samson of the firewood guillotine. See here again, loo, 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 and off her head comes. Now a child, tickle, tickle, pickle, pickle, and off its head comes. All the family." Lucy shuddered as he threw 2 more billets into his basket, but it was impossible to be there while the woodsawer was at work and not be in his sight. She's like, "I wish I could go and not have to deal with him. I'd go a different time." But this was the prescribed time that her husband can come, so she's got to put up with this obnoxious woodsawer. Thenceforth, to secure his goodwill, she always spoke to him first, and often gave him drink money, which he readily received. He was an inquisitive fellow, and sometimes when she had quite forgotten him in gazing at the prison roof and grates, and in lifting her heart up to her husband, she would come to herself to find him looking at her, with his knee on his bench and his saw stopped in its work. "But it's not my business," he would generally say at those times, and would briskly fall to his sawing again. In all weathers, in the snow and frost of winter, in the bitter winds of spring, in the hot sunshine of summer, in the rains of autumn, again in the snow and frost of winter, Lucy passed 2 hours of every day at this place, and every day on leaving it, she kissed the prison wall. Her husband saw her, so she leaned from her father. It might have been once in 5 or 6 times. It might be twice or thrice running. It might be not for a week or a fortnight. Together, it was enough that he could and did see her when the chances served, and on that possibility, she would have waited out the day 7 days a week. Hi, Sarah Lee. Their eyes were watching God and 1,000 Splendid Suns. You're welcome. I'm drawing a complete blank on Their Eyes Were Watching God. I didn't think I did that one, but I'm maybe crazy. I know I'm oftentimes crazy. Eyes. Oh, God, what a blank. Of course. That was one of my favorite stories. I just blanked on it completely. I thought you'd been here before, Sarah. Thank you for letting me know. And I hope you keep reading with me. We're on A Tale of Two Cities now. So she's so faithful. She goes every day just on the off chance, and he doesn't see her every day. Sometimes it's twice in a row. Sometimes it's just, once every couple of weeks, but she's faithful. She's consistent, even when this obnoxious man is there pestering her. "But it's not my business," he would generally say at those times, and would briskly fall to his sawing again. In all weathers, in the snow and frost of winter, in the bitter winds of spring, in the hot sunshine of summer, in the rains of autumn, again in the snow and frost of winter. So we have time passing, right? Thanks for stopping in, Sarah. I appreciate it. It was enough that he could and did see her when the chance served. And on that possibility, she would have waited out the day 7 days a week. So just knowing she could be some comfort to her husband, she would have made this trip. These occupations brought her round to the December months, wherein her father walked among the terrors with a steady head. On a lightly snowing afternoon, she arrived at the usual corner. It was a day of some wild rejoicing and a festival. She had seen the houses as she came along, decorated with little pikes and with little red caps stuck upon them, also with tricolored ribbons, also with the standard inscription. Tricolored letters were the favorite: Republic One and indivisible, liberty, equality, fraternity, or death. The miserable shop of the wood czar was so small that its whole surface furnished very indifferent space for his legend. He had got somebody to scrawl it up for him, however, who had squeezed death in with the most inappropriate difficulty. On his housetop, he displayed pike and cap, as a good citizen must, and in a window he had stationed his saw inscribed with his little Saint Guillotine, for the great sharp female was by that time popularly canonized. His shop was shut, and he was not there, which was a relief to Lucy, and left her quite alone. But he was not far off, for presently she heard a troubled movement and a shouting coming along, which filled her with fear. A moment afterwards, and a throng of people came pouring round the corner by the prison wall, in the midst of whom was a wood czar, hand in hand with the Vengeance. Remember the Vengeance, the lady? There could not be fewer than 500 people, and they were dancing like 5,000 demons. There was no music other than their own singing. They danced to the popular Revolution song, keeping a ferocious time that was like a gnashing of teeth in unison. Men and women danced together. Women danced together. Men danced together, as hazard had brought them together. At first, they were a mere storm of coarse red caps and coarse woolen rags. But as they filled the place and stopped to dance about Lucy, some ghastly apparition of a dance figure gone raving mad arose among them. They advanced, retreated, struck at one another's hands, clutched at one another's heads, spun round alone, caught one another, and spun round in pairs until many of them dropped. While those were down, the rest linked hand in hand, and all spun round together. Then the ring broke, and in separate rings of 2 and 4 they turned and turned until they all stopped at once, began again, struck, clutched, and tore, and then reversed the spin, and all spun round another way. Suddenly they stopped again, paused, struck out the time afresh, formed into 2 lines the width of the public way, and with their heads low down and their hands high up, swooped screaming off. No fight could have been half so terrible as this dance. It was so emphatically a fallen sport, a something once innocent, delivered over to all devilry, a healthy pastime changed into a means of angering the blood, bewildering the senses, and stealing the heart, making the heart strong. Such grace as was visible in it made it the uglier, showing how warped and perverted all things good by nature were become. The maidenly bosom bared to this, the pretty almost child's head, thus distracted, meaning Lucy looked still like a child. The delicate foot mincing in this slough of blood and dirt were types of the disjointed time. This was the Carmagnole. As it passed, leaving Lucy frightened and bewildered in the doorway of the wood czar's house, the feathery snow fell as quietly and lay as white and soft as if it had never been. "Oh, my father," for he stood before her when she lifted up the eye she had momentarily darkened with her hand. "Such a cruel, bad sight." "I know, my dear, I know. I have seen it many times. Don't be frightened. Not one of them would harm you." "I'm not frightened for myself, my father, but when I think of my husband and the mercies of these people." "We will set him above their mercies very soon. I left him climbing to the window, and I came to tell you. There is no one here to see. You may kiss your hand towards that highest shelving roof." "I do so, Father, and I send him my soul with it." Like she just wants to touch him. "Oh, my husband, I love you so much." "So, honey, hi. A footstep in the snow, Madame Defarge." "I salute you, citizeness," from the doctor. "I salute you, citizen." This in passing, nothing more. Madame Defarge gone, like a shadow over the white road. Ooh, for a scary movie, you feel like the dark music. Madame Defarge staring. "I salute you." And then she disappears. "Give me your arm, my love. Pass from here with an air of cheerfulness and courage for his sake." That was well done. They had left the spot. "It shall not be in vain. Charles is summoned for tomorrow." "For tomorrow?" "There is no time to lose. I'm well prepared, but there are precautions to be taken that could not be taken until he was actually summoned before the tribunal. He has not received the notice yet, but I know that he will presently be summoned for tomorrow and removed to the conciergerie. I have timely information. You're not afraid. What's the favorite book that I recommend? Every book that I read tends to be my favorite, Suhani. Let me ponder that. I only have a few paragraphs to finish this chapter, and I'll be thinking about that while I'm reading, and I'll give you an answer. I must see Lori, the doctor repeated, turning her another way. The staunch old gentleman. Oh no, I skipped a whole bunch. She could scarcely answer. He had said, "You're not afraid." She could scarcely answer. "I trust in you." "Do so implicitly. Your suspense is nearly ended, my darling. He shall be restored to you within a few hours. I have encompassed him with every protection. I must see Lori." He stopped. There was a heavy lumbering of wheels within hearing. They both knew too well what it meant. 1, 2, 3. 3 tumbrils faring away with dead loads over the hushing snow. It's the wagon with the dead people from the guillotine. The staunch old gentleman was still in his trust, had never left it. He and his books were in frequent requisition as to property confiscated and made national. What he could save for the owners, he saved. No better man living to hold fast by what Tellson's had in keeping and to hold his peace. A murky red and yellow sky and a rising mist from the Seine, the river, denoted the approach of darkness. It was almost dark when they arrived at the bank. The stately residence of Monseigneur was altogether blighted and deserted. Above a heap of dust and ashes in the court ran the letters. National property, Republic one and indivisible, liberty, equality, fraternity, or death. Who could that be with Mr. Lorry, the owner of the riding coat upon the chair, who must not be seen? From whom, newly arrived, did he come out agitated and surprised to take his favorite in his arms? To whom did he appear to repeat her faltering words when, raising his voice and turning his head towards the door of the room from which he had issued, he said, "Removed to the conciergerie and summoned for tomorrow?" Oh, it ends there. But guys, as I talked to Suhani, chapter 6 is triumph. Now, I know the ending, but I'm just trying to, lure y'all in. So we will read chapter 6 because I'm only 22 minutes in. But Suhani, let me think. If you like fantasy, one of my favorite books to teach that I haven't put on my YouTube channel, it was a series. The first book is The Hobbit, and then it's the Lord of the Rings series. I loved that story. They had the movies. The movies were not nearly as good as the book, but you have to like fantasy. And it creates another world, and sometimes it's a little hard. Hey, Sid, Agatha Christie. Well, read all of her. I've got several on my playlist. I loved her books when I was a young girl. I loved mysteries and trying to solve it and trying to figure it out. But she's pretty crafty, so it's not always easy to figure out the ending or who did it. And then, of course, I love Their Eyes Were Watching God and A Thousand Splendid Suns. Those are two of my favorite on my playlist. So it's so many great books. When I was young, I loved Gone with the Wind. And my father was very troubled by the fact that I loved Gone with the Wind, but I loved Scarlett O'Hara, who is a villainess. She's, not considered a hero in literature, but she faced such great obstacles to what she wanted, although what she wanted was very self-serving and selfish, and she was immature and childish. And from a mature person's point of view, I can see all the problems with it. But I liked her tenacity. I liked that she broke all the rules. She was the first empowered feminine character I ever read. Most books, the hero was the man who saved the day, and the girl was just helpless and bumbling along and scared. And, so to me, to see this Scarlett O'Hara that was just breaking all society's rules and scandalous, but she did it for her family, for her land, for herself, for her own desires. She was an exciting character for me to read when I was young. So Suhani, Murder on the Orient Express. I do love that one. I'm trying to think. The Mousetrap is that famous play, and I have an Agatha Christie anthology. It's got The Mousetrap and so many others in it. I like short stories too. So, everybody's Sid Hart. Sid, we're so glad to have you here. Everybody's saying hi. All right, let's keep reading chapter. Let me see how long chapter 6 is before I start to read. I think I can do it. It's a little long, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Okay. Chapter 6 of Book 3, Triumph. The dread tribunal of 5 judges, public prosecutor, and determined jury sat every day. And this is such an interesting part of history. They just kept cranking out these death warrants and guillotining, executing, with just blood. It was just such an interesting study in the level of anger humans can possess and what they'll do in revenge for what they see as this horrible abuse. Humans have this great capacity to love and do remarkably good, humane things, and to be savage. We see that in Lord of the Flies, this savagery of I want my way and I want my revenge and I will brutalize anybody between me and that cleansing of evil that's in my soul. It's not cleansing. I mean, it's just this pouring out of evil in my soul. Their lists went forth every evening and were read out by the jailers of the various prisons to the prisoners. The standard jailer joke was, "Come out and listen to the evening paper, you inside there." Charles Evremond called Darnay. So at last began the evening paper at La Force. When a name was called, its owner stepped apart into a spot reserved for those who were announced as being thus fatally recorded. Charles Evremond called Darnay had reason to know the usage. He had seen hundreds pass away so. His bloated jailer, who wore spectacles to read with, glanced over them to assure himself that he had taken his place and went through the list, making a similar short pause at each name. There were 23 names, but only 20 were responded to, for one of the prisoners so summoned had died in jail and been forgotten, and 2 had already been guillotined and forgotten. The list was read. In the vaulted chamber where Darnay had seen the associated prisoners on the night of his arrival, every one of those had perished in the massacre. Every human creature he had since cared for and parted with had died on the scaffold. There were hurried words of farewell and kindness, but the parting was soon over. It was the incident every day, and the Society of La Force were engaged in the preparation of some games of forfeit and a little concert for that evening. They crowded to the grates and shed tears there, but 20 places in the projected entertainments had to be refilled. And the time was, at best, short to the lock-up hour, when the common rooms and quarters would be delivered over to the great dogs who kept watch there through the night. The prisoners were far from insensible or unfeeling. Their ways arose out of a condition of the time. Similar, so they're saying it's not that they were horrible people that didn't care, because they just went there and just announced the 20, they're going to be executed, 20 more replaced them in the prison, and then they were locked up, and they just kind of went through the motions. And so Dickens is saying it's not that they were careless, that without heart, it's that this happens day after day after day. And when you have this kind of darkness and death and brutality around you, you just shut down. And so they just had to accept it, because this is the way. You couldn't rail against it. You couldn't fight against it. You were helpless. You just had to accept what this was. It was being pushed on you. Similarly, though with a subtle difference, a species of fervor or intoxication known without doubt to have led some persons to the brave guillotine unnecessarily and to die by it, was not mere boastfulness, but a wild infection of the wildly shaken public mind. In seasons of pestilence, some of us will have a secret attraction to the disease, a terrible passing inclination to die of it. And all of us have like wonders hidden in our breasts, only needing circumstances to evoke them. The passage to the conciergerie was short and dark. The night in its vermin-haunted halls, vermin are like rats, was long and cold. Next day, 15 prisoners were put to the bar before Charles Darnay's name was called. All the 15 were condemned, and the trials of the whole occupied an hour and a half. 15 trials in an hour and a half, all with the verdict of execution. Charles Evremond, called Darnay, was at length arraigned. His judges sat upon the bench in feathered hats, but the rough red cap and tricolored cockade was the headdress otherwise prevailing. Looking at the jury and the turbulent audience, he might have thought that the usual order of things was reversed, and that the felons were trying the honest men. The lowest, cruelest, and worst populace of a city, never without its quantity of low, cruel, and bad, were the directing spirits of the scene, noisily commenting, applauding, disapproving, anticipating, and precipitating the result without a check. Of the men, the greater part were armed in various ways. Of the women, some wore knives, some daggers, some ate and drank as they looked on, many knitted. Among these last was one with a spare piece of knitting under her arm as she worked. She was in a front row by the side of a man whom she had never seen since his arrival at Barrier, but whom he directly remembered as Defarge. He noticed that she once or twice whispered in his ear, and that she seemed to be his wife. But what he most noticed in the two figures was that although they were posted as close to himself as they could be, they never looked towards him. They seemed to be waiting for something with a dogged determination, and they looked at the jury, but at nothing else. Under the president sat Dr. Manette in his usual quiet dress. As well as the prisoner could see, he and Mr. Lorry were the only men there, unconnected with the tribunal, who wore their usual clothes and had not assumed the coarse garb of the Carmagnole. So who are the two people staring at Charles Darnay? Who do you think? It's this couple that they're a husband and wife. She's knitting, and they won't look at him, but they keep looking at something. So it's more than likely, and I'm pretty certain it is, but they didn't say it, the Defarges. My southern accent there, the Defarges. Charles Evremond, called Darnay, was accused by the public prosecutor as an immigrant whose life was forfeit to the Republic under the decree which banished all immigrants on pain of death. It was nothing that the decree bore date since his return to France. There he was, and there was the decree. He had been taken in France, and his head was demanded. "Take off his head," cried the audience. "An enemy to the Republic." The president rang his bell to silence those cries and asked the prisoner whether it was not true that he had lived many years in England. Undoubtedly, it was. Hi, Flowers and Lace. Kelly, where he was living, who? I'm not sure what your question is. Where he was living? It's a statement, so it's not a question. So I must have, he was living in England, right? Oh, chapter 10 of Kite Running. That's Flowers and Lace. So, Kelly, if you're asking me a question or you're telling me something, I'm not clear what that message means. Was he not an immigrant then? What did he call himself? Not an immigrant, he hoped, within the sense and spirit of the law. Why not? The president desired to know. Because he had voluntarily relinquished a title that was distasteful to him and a station that was distasteful to him and had left his country. He had submitted before the word immigrant and the present acceptation by the tribunal was in use to live by his own industry in England rather than on the industry of the overladen of France. What proof had he of this? He handed in the names of two witnesses, Théophile Gabelle and Alexandre Manette. But he had married in England, the president reminded him. True, but not an English woman. A citizeness of France, yes, by birth. Her name and family, Lucy Manette, only daughter of Dr. Manette, the good physician who sits there. Oh, yeah. Kelly, when I see Caper, I know that's you, but I say Caper. Yeah, I had asked that, and that's a place where Manette had been living with the Defarges. And Michael says, reading 1,000 Splendid Suns right now, just came to say thank you so much for your videos. I'm not a hero, but thank you. I love to think of myself as super reader. So that would be kind of fun, huh? So they're doing this cross-examination to say, he left, he did the right thing, he disavowed his title, he doesn't agree with the nobility did, he disavowed it long before all of this happened, and so therefore, when he came back, he's innocent, he's got two witnesses to prove it. On these few steps of his dangerous way, Charles Darnay had set his foot according to Dr. Manette's reiterated instructions. The same cautious counsel directed every step that lay before him and had prepared every inch of his road. The president asked, why had he returned to France when he did, and not sooner? He had not returned sooner, he replied, simply because he had no means of living in France except those he had resigned. Whereas in England, he lived by giving instruction in the French language and literature. He had returned when he did on the pressing and written entreaty of a French citizen who represented that his life was endangered by his absence. He had come back to save a citizen's life and to bear his testimony at whatever personal hazard to the truth. Was that criminal in the eyes of the Republic? The populace cried enthusiastically, no! And the president rang his bell to quiet them, which it did not, for they continued to cry, no, until they left off of their own will. The president required the name of that citizen. The accused explained that the citizen was his first witness. He also referred with confidence to the citizen's letter, which had been taken from him at the barrier, but which he did not doubt would be found among the papers then before the president. The doctor had taken care that it should be there, had assured him that it would be there, and at this stage of the proceedings, it was produced and read. Citizen Gabelle was called to confirm it and did so. Citizen Gabelle hinted with infinite delicacy and politeness that in the pressure of business imposed on the tribunal by the multitudes of enemies of the Republic with which it had to deal, he had been slightly overworked in his prison of the Abbaye. In fact, had rather passed out of the tribunal's patriotic remembrance until 3 days ago. Hey, Daniel. I'm in this version, so I don't know if this is the edition you have. This is the AMSCO Literature Program. So on that, I am on page 260, but it is book 3, chapter 6, and I'm almost to the end of this chapter. So if that's helpful. I'm sorry that, I would be surprised if anybody has this version. I don't think it's for sale anymore. It's, you can see, very worn and loved, bookmarked and marked it, written in. So this is chapter 6, Triumph of book 3. Did that help you find it? I'm trying to see how many paragraphs. So let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like 11 paragraphs from the end. Oh my gosh, Kelly, he covered so many subjects, and it's so woven in his opinion about things. Until three days ago, when he had been summoned before it and had been set at liberty on the juries declaring themselves satisfied with the accusation against him, answered, as to himself, by the surrender of the citizen Evremond called Darnay. Dr. Manette was next questioned, his high personal popularity and the clearness of his answers. By the way, I think about the scene from the black and white movie. There is an old black and white, it was probably the 40s or 50s done, Charles Dickens. You can find it on YouTube. And it does this scene really, really well. So if you want to not continue reading, if you've read with me this far to hear me say this, I would encourage you, or if you like the story so well, and if you're one who likes old movies, because it's not going to have the technology of modern movies. It's got that old movie feel, but a lot of things are retro now. If you like the idea of an old movie, there was an old black and white Charles Dickens Tale of Two Cities version on YouTube that I watched years ago. So I'm assuming it's still there. His high personal popularity and the clearness of his answers made a great impression. Remember, Dr. Manette has been working tirelessly for the citizens, and because he's a doctor, he was going to the hospitals and the prisons and taking care of people. And he had served in the Bastille as a wrongfully imprisoned hero of the French Republic. Well, that's anachronistic for me to say that, of the French citizenry. Made a great impression, but as he proceeded, as he showed that the accused was his first friend on his release from his long imprisonment, that the accused had remained in England, always faithful and devoted to his daughter and himself in their exile, that so far from being in favor with the aristocrat government there, he had actually been tried for his life by it as the foe of England and the friend of the United States, As he brought these circumstances into view with the greatest discretion and with the straightforward force of truth and earnestness, the jury and the populace became one. At last, when he appealed by name to Monsieur Lorry, an English gentleman then and there present, who, like himself, had been a witness on that English trial and could corroborate his account of it, the jury declared that they had heard enough and that they were ready with their votes. The president were content to receive them. At every vote, the jury voted aloud and individually. The populace set up a shout of applause, and all the voices were in the prisoner's favor. Triumph. So we're going to get Charles out of the prison. And the president declared him free. Then began one of those extraordinary scenes with which the populace sometimes gratified their fickleness or their better impulses towards generosity and mercy, or which they regarded as some set off against their swollen account of cruel rage. No man can decide now to which of these motives such extraordinary scenes were referable. It is probable to a blending of all the three, with the second predominating. No sooner was the acquittal pronounced, so he's found innocent, than tears were shed as freely as blood at another time, and such fraternal embraces were bestowed upon the prisoner by as many of both sexes as could rush at him, that after his long and unwholesome confinement, he was in danger of fainting from exhaustion. Nonetheless, he knew very well that the very same people, carried by another current, would have rushed at him with the same intensity to rend him to pieces and strew him over the streets. So this was a happy hug, but he said it could have just as easily been that in their mania and their hysteria, their mass hysteria, that they could have come to destroy him. His removal to make way for another accused person who were to be tried rescued him from these caresses for the moment. 5 were to be tried together next as enemies of the Republic, for as much as they had not assisted it by word or deed. So quick was the tribunal to compensate itself and the nation for a chance lost, that these 5 came down to him. You scared me, Yoko. I don't know what makes her bark. It's my daughter's puppy. Not puppy, it's a dog. The first of them told him so with the customary prison sign of death, a raised finger, and they all added in words, "Long live the Republic! Viva la République!" The 5 had had, it's true, no audience to strengthen their proceedings, for when he and Dr. Manette emerged from the gate, Yoko, come settle down. The 5 had had, it is true, no audience to lengthen their proceedings, for when he and Dr. Manette emerged from the gate, there was a great crowd about it, in which there seemed to be every face he had seen in court except 2, for which he looked in vain. What 2 is he looking for? He's looking for those 2 people that were on the front row, the Defarges. On his coming out, the concourse made at him anew, weeping, embracing, and shouting, all by turns and all together, until the very tide of the river on the bank, of which the mad scene was acted, seemed to run mad like the people on the shore. They put him into a great chair they had among them, and which they had taken either out of the court itself or one of its rooms or passages. Over the chair they had thrown a red flag, and to the back of it they had bound a pike with a red cap on its top. In this car of triumph, not even the doctor's entreaties could prevent his being carried off to his home on men's shoulders, with a confused sea of red caps heaving about him and casting up to sight from the stormy deep such wrecks of faces that he more than once misdoubted his mind being in confusion, and that he was in the tumbrel on his way to the guillotine. Like he feels so lost and confused, and they've got him up on his shoulders bouncing around. He's like, oh, they guillotined me and I'm dead. I don't know what's true. As he held her in his heart and turned her beautiful head between his face and the brawling crowd, so that his tears and her lips might come together unseen, of the few of the people fell to dancing. Instantly, all the rest fell to dancing, and the courtyard overflowed with the Carmagnole. Then they elevated into the vacant chair a young woman from the crowd to be carried as the goddess of liberty, and then swelling and overflowing out into the adjacent streets and along the river's bank and over the bridge, the Carmagnole absorbed them, every one, and whirled them away. I want to get a little bit of history about that, because sadly, I don't know what that is. A lively song popular at the time of the first French Revolution. A rallying cry or entertainment for revolutionaries. It was also used to insult opponents of the French Revolution. Let's see. There's a video. Okay. So there's our little bit of true history there. Let's see where we were. Embracing and shouting all by turns and all together until the very tide of the river on the bank, of which the mad scene was acted, seemed to run mad like the people on the shore. They put him in the great chair. Okay, I already read all that. In a wild, dreamlike procession, which is to this dance, embracing whom they met and pointing him out, they carried him on, reddening the snowy streets with the prevailing Republican color, and winding and tramping through them as they had reddened them below the snow with a deeper dye. They carried him thus into the courtyard of the building where he lived. Her father had gone on before to prepare her, and when her husband stood upon his feet, she dropped insensible in his arms. As he held her to his heart and turned her beautiful head between his face and the brawling crowd, so that his tears and her lips might come together unseen, a few of the people fell to dancing. Instantly, all the rest fell to dancing, and the courtyard overflowed with the Carmagnole. Then they elevated into the vacant chair a young woman from the crowd to be carried as the goddess of liberty, and then swelling and overflowing out into the adjacent streets and along the river's bank and over the bridge, the Carmagnole absorbed them, everyone, and whirled them away. That song, that da 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 da. After grasping the doctor's hand as he stood victorious and proud before him, after grasping the hand of Mr. Lorry, who came panting and breathless from his struggle against the waterspout of the Carmagnole, after kissing little Lucy, who was lifted up to clasp her arms around his neck, and after embracing the ever-zealous and faithful Pross, the lady in waiting of Lucy, who lifted her, he took his wife in his arms and carried her up to their rooms. Lucy, my own, I am safe. Oh, dearest Charles, let me thank God for this on my knees as I have prayed to him. They all reverently bowed their heads and hearts. When she was again in his arms, he said to her, and now speak to your father, dearest. No other man in all this France could have done what he has done for me. She laid her head upon her father's breast, as she had laid his poor head upon her own breast long, long ago. He was happy in the return he had made her. He was recompensed for his suffering. He was repaid for his suffering. He was proud of his strength. You must not be weak, my darling, he remonstrated. Don't tremble so. I have saved him. So that would be a great way for it to end. And mais non, it's not over. And notice that the next chapter is a knock at the door. So what will happen next? We haven't gotten to that moment of honor and loyalty and just chill bump causing great ending. That's still to come. Hello, live stream. I was able to be here again. Yes. I will play some Animal Crossing. I'll watch a new series my brother just told me about. In keeping with this French theme, it's called Lupin. I'll probably watch that on Netflix. It does have French subtitles, but maybe it'll help me improve my French. And I ask you guys to keep subscribing and keep watching and keep reading. And I will read to you next time. See ya.